white genocide indicates that, according to the official definition of genocide put forth by the United Nations, the white nations are currently undergoing a genocidal attack through the invasion of their homelands and through the intentional replacement of them in their native lands. And this is backed by a tremendous amount of evidence. I mean, there's the Kohagi plan, I think, which dates back to the early 20th century. There's a Jewish woman living in Sweden who's a professor. There's a whole bunch of academics that you can see that talk about the desirability of the extinction of the white race. This is not crazy white supremacists making stuff up. These are well-documented, well-referenced statements and projects that are conceived to weaken the influence of white people throughout the world, and in some cases actually to exterminate the white race through interbreeding. And so it is a legitimate issue, and the fact that someone like Hillary Clinton should attempt to minimize it or ridicule it is absolutely absurd. And so the problem is, the problem with it rhetorically, of course, is that when most people think of genocide, they think about the Holocaust. So when they look at the concept of white genocide, they say, well, how is that possible? Where are the stacks of bodies? They could understand that they can understand, what happened in China during the Great Leap Forward. They can understand that was genocide. They can understand that what happened in Turkey to the Armenians, that was genocide. But how is nobody is slaughtering white people in industrial quantities anywhere. So how can it be genocide? But the fact is that if we were to send 1 million or whatever, if we were to send 10 million Chinese people into a small country like Denmark, and forcibly interbreed them with all of the Danes for several generations, and keep sending Chinese in, within a certain period of time, there would be no more Danish people. That would be a genocidal act. I mean, the Orthodox Jews worry all the time about excessive assimilation. They're afraid of, you can see lots of articles all the time about, is America dangerous to the Jews? Not in the Nazi sense, but in the overly friendly sense, where, like Ivana Trump, yes, she converted to Judaism, but at the end of the day, genetically, her kids, in fact, if you look at how Italian the Ashkenazi Jews are, her kids are probably less than 20% Jewish in the actual genetic sense. And so, the white genocide term is an abstract term referring to the ongoing invasion of white native lands and the attempts to dilute the white genetics by encouraging them to interbreed with people of other races. And of course, you see this on, like we talked about, you see this on practically every commercial you see on television.
So yeah, I just wanted to differentiate it. You said with the example of the 10 million people, 10 million Chinese that was forced into breeding. The encouragement of interbreeding is a bit of a different moral category.
Oh yeah, like I said, I've criticized the heavy reliance on the use of the term simply because I think it is too abstract a term for people to understand. It does fit the legal definition of genocide, but it's a very soft form of it. And because it's a soft form of it taking place over a long period of time, that's something that the average individual is not really able to recognize or understand is taking place.
Well, then it's interesting to me. One of and I do find this whole line of thinking very challenging. So, bear with me as I hack my way through the undergrowth of the language. But one of the things, and I know I almost hesitate to use the obvious polar bear example, but when there is a decrease in the birth rate in a particular species to the point where the numbers of that species decline precipitously, then, oh no, the spotted owl is, the polar bear over there, we're running out, the population is in decline. And it certainly seems to be the case if you compare sort of the birth rates of whites in Europe and in North America, more so in Europe. The birth rate for whites compared to the baby boom in the post-Second World War period is down by what? 500%, 400%, depends on sort of where you count. But from sort of 4 to 5 kids, it's like 1 to 2. That's a huge drop-off in the birth rate, and that is going to result in a significant population decline. But when it happens to polar bears, it's a catastrophe. If it's happening to white people, it's progress. So that is one of these things is a little challenging to unravel, at least from the outside of this intellectual approach.
Well, where you realize that it's not just some sort of coincidence or something is when you look at the fact that back in the 70s, when the country was considerably more white and the population was much smaller, they used to talk about overpopulation all the time. How often do you hear them talking about overpopulation as millions of immigrants are flooding in? You never hear them talking about overpopulation in Nigeria, despite the fact that that country cannot feed itself and is projected to have over 400 million residents, 400 million people living in Nigeria by 2050. There are massive human catastrophes that are just waiting to happen, and yet they don't want to talk about the idea that there might be overpopulation in Africa is never discussed. They're worrying about overpopulation in countries like Germany, where the birth rate is well below the replacement rate. And so that's when you start to realize that, okay, this is not about a genuine concern for too many people living on the planet. There's something else going on here. There's definitely an anti-European agenda at work.
Well, not to mention, of course, the fact that when you take people from the third world and put them in the first world, their resource consumption and environmental footprint and impact and carbon impact and so on go up many times. But there doesn't seem to be any particular discussion of the environmental impacts of moving people and giving them first world consumption standards.
Well, we know why that is, and it's because I believe it might have even been David Geffen, but someone promised the leading environmental organization in the United States $1 million as long as they would drop their opposition to immigration. And so, which they then did, and that's why you never hear environmental groups talk about the environmental impact of immigration, because they've been paid off to not talk about it.